to a Hope 1032 podcast.
The Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore, because life's just better with a book.
Welcome to the Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore from the Centre for Public Christianity. And today we're joined by Alanda Joyce from the Little Lost Bookshop. Welcome, Alanda. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks, Katrina. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so this is actually our 40th episode. How about that? Does that make you feel old, Natasha?
Oh, that crept up on us. Okay.
40, yeah. And
we read so many books.
We must have read a lot. And yeah, so this episode, because some of our favourite or most popular episodes have been crime fiction, I'm calling this episode Killer Reads, the stories of murder. What is it about murder that fascinates so many readers and writers? And today we have a couple of books that really play with the genre and conventions of the murder mystery. So Natasha Moore has been reading the hit Aussie novel Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. It's set around a family reunion, but the members of the Cunningham family don't really like each other. In fact, the only thing they have in common is that they've all killed someone. I've been reading the latest murder mystery by Australian author Sulari Gentill. It's called The Woman in the Library. In this book, an Australian novelist is writing a murder mystery about four strangers who happen to be in the Boston Public Library at the very moment a woman is murdered. Her scream brings them together, but is there another connection between these four new friends? And Alanda from the Little Lost Bookshop has been reading The Sorrow Stone by Kari Gislason. Set in the 10th century, it's based on the true story of Disa, one of Iceland's most famous women. Her quest to revenge her brother's murder forces Disa to flee with her son across the fjords of Iceland. It's a saga of divided loyalties, revenge, betrayal, and of course, murder. But first, let's hear from Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson.
Considering what I've told you, it is tricky to know where to start. When I say everyone, let's draw the line for that statement at my branch of the family tree. Although my cousin Amy did bring a prohibited peanut butter sandwich to a corporate picnic once and her HR rep almost carked it, but I won't put her on the bingo card. Look, we're not a family of psychopaths. Some of us are good, others are bad, and some just unfortunate. Which one am I? I haven't figured that out yet. Of course, there's also the little matter of a serial killer known as the Black Tongue, who gets mixed up in all this, and $267,000 in cash. But we'll get to that. I know you're probably wondering something else right now. I did say everyone, and I promised no tricks. Have I killed someone? Yes, I have. Who was it? Let's get started.
That's from Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson, narrated by Barton Welch. In this book, the Cunningham family are having a reunion at a ski resort. There's just one problem. They don't really like each other. In fact, the only thing they have in common is that they've all killed someone, including our narrator, who assures us he will be reliable and report the events accurately, both telling the story and playing the sleuth at the same time. Natasha Moore's been reading this one. Hey, Natasha.
Hey, Katrina.
Tell us about our narrator. What do we know about him?
Well, we know, eventually pretty much everything because he's very open. As you say, he promises at the start that he'll be a reliable narrator. His name is Ernest Cunningham. The names often mean something in this book. And he is not a crime writer, but he writes books about crime writing. So he writes books about how to write a crime novel and, sells them online and makes quite a bit of money from that, it would seem. You can just kind of compile the rules and put them out there and people who want to write a crime novel will buy them. So he finds himself both in a family where a series of unfortunate events have happened and, he's a bit like, oh, it's not like we're all a family of psychopaths. Like there have been some circumstances and some more extenuating than others, but as it turns out, everyone happens to have killed someone in some way or another. So he's in the midst of that family and also here they are at this family reunion. His brother Michael is getting out of jail, where he actually has, by his testimony, put him for murder. So that's kind of the fracture in the family, is that he's betrayed. You learn this very early in the novel. I feel like this isn't a spoiler. And a murder happens on the weekend. And so then he's like, okay, well, I need to figure this out. Either Michael didn't do it and I need to redeem myself by clearing his name, or he did do it and I'll put the final nail kind of in his coffin. And so he kind of takes us through it and really tells this story in keeping with all the different, crime story rules and formulas. And that's quite a lot of fun.
I know that the bodies sort of start to pile up throughout this story, but what's the kind of the first murder that we come across, if that's not a spoiler?
So the first murder they come across, nobody knows who it is. There's a man who, turns up. They're like, maybe he got lost in the snow and froze to death. This is set in a kind of chalet, like a ski resort near Jindabyne. It's kind of fun that it's a very Australian setting, but also a very kind of crime novel setting. There's a big storm coming. They're going to be trapped in theory. And, this man is found kind of apparently dead from exposure, but actually one of the Cunningham family is a doctor and she's like, this guy didn't die of exposure. So there's partly a trying to figure out who this guy is and what connection he has or doesn't have to any of them. And then also, yes, he is not the last body. In fact, in the opening, in the prologue, Ernest tells us, in the same place where he tells us about the rules that he's going to follow and that he's going to be a reliable narrator, he tells us when all the murders happen. So he kind of takes you through. He says, if you're just here for the gory details, deaths in this book either happen or are reported to have happened on page 14, page 46, page 65, a twofer on page 75, and a hat trick on page 81. Then there's a bit of a stretch, but it picks up again on page 174. So he goes through and tells you all the pages, and you can kind of flip back and forth and be like, oh, look, a murder is happening on this page, and pick this one. So it's quite fun.
So is anyone left at the end of the book?
It's a fair question. I know, and it's quite a traumatic family reunion, gotta say. But Ernest at least is left. I'll give you that non-spoiler as he's writing the book.
I mean, you said it's set in Australia, and does it have a uniquely Australian voice, do you think? Did it have sort of an Australian way of seeing the world and talking about things?
That's interesting. I suppose it did. I mean, there's a lot of kind of Australian places and so on in it. In some ways, it situates itself more in relation to the genre than to the location. So, I mean, it's been billed as kind of a cross between Agatha Christie and Knives Out and the Thursday Murder Club, which, how can you not read that book? Like, if you enjoyed those things, you will enjoy this book. But yeah, I feel like it's probably not quite as Australian as the Thursday Murder Club is English.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely is. And I like that. I feel like there's a lot of Australian crime fiction around, and, people say we're in a golden age of it. Yeah.
Most of the Australian crime fiction, though, is still kind of that bleak, outback, gritty kind of, I'm thinking of Chris Hammer and Jane Harper, and this sounds more like it's just fun.
Yeah, this is very different to that. Benjamin Stevenson is also a stand-up comedian. That's all you need to know.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, is the book funny?
Yes, it is. It's very funny. I think it is. I read a couple of reviews that was like, oh, the formula's become a bit much and he overplays his hand and that kind of thing. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very funny. There are some points where it becomes genuinely tragic and you're like, oh, yeah.
Okay.
Murder, hey. Yeah. But mostly it is quite comical and he's quite hapless, Ernest is, and that's quite fun to watch.
A lot of the reviews have said, it's really unique or it's fresh. What would you say is unique about this book?
I would say it's the novel equivalent of Knives Out, which, I mean, is fresh and original in the sense that it wraps up and ties together all the traditional tropes of the genre, and that in itself is a really kind of fun, unique thing to do. And this kind of does that for the novel, and kind of weaves everything together. And even though he kind of promises to tell you everything in advance, he manages both to fulfill that and to have a bit of a shock twist or two at the end. So, in some ways, fresh and original, but because it, brings together all of the formulas and plays on all of them. It's kind of a summary novel of the genre, which I always enjoy.
Can you see this one being made into a movie too?
Yeah, I can. Yep. Okay. We'll talk about it again when the movie comes out, Katrina.
Okay. So the ending, of course, all important. Were you happy with the ending?
I was, actually. I mean, there were a few things where I was like, does that? But I just really appreciated the kind of how everything was tied together. And I think because I picked half of the denouement and the other half I didn't pick, and that's kind of a good place to be, because you're like, at the same time, I feel smug and satisfied and surprised. So well done, Benjamin Stevenson.
Yeah, that means he's given you just enough clues to kind of get a little bit of the way there, but not so many that there was no mystery left. So is this something you think anyone would enjoy?
I want to say yes, but clearly not everyone did. Clearly some people found it a bit gimmicky or overdone. I would say, so I loved the movie Knives Out, and I thought absolutely everyone would love it. But people who I love and respect disliked it. And this is, inexplicable to me, but also they did. So maybe here's my theory, but I haven't, got the evidence for it yet, is that if you enjoyed Knives Out, you will enjoy the book. I have disconfirming evidence of that already, because I know someone didn't like the movie but did like the book. So, okay, I don't know. Give it a go. It's fun. It's quick.
Yeah.
Up to you.
I'm in. I'm definitely reading that one.
Good.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Natasha. We've been talking about Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. So I'm going to do my book next, because it's actually quite similar in that it's a murder mystery with this kind of meta narrative going on. So it's called The Woman in the Library by Australian author Sulari Gentill. And some people may know her. She's written 10 books in this Roland Sinclair historical murder mystery series.
I've read one of those. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've only actually read the first one at this point, but I would like to read more of them. There's 10. This book is a contemporary standalone, and I was lucky enough to go to the launch in Wagga, because she actually lives not too far away in the Snowy Valleys. And this book is already getting a lot of international attention, and it's only just come out.
It's got a great cover.
Yeah, the American cover is completely different.
Oh,
this one's really fun and upbeat. The American one's really dark and sort of noir.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's really interesting.
Maybe says something about what Americans are looking for.
But it is selling really well. So the main story is a murder mystery about 4 strangers who are brought together by a scream in the Boston Public Library. So there's Freddie and Kane. They're both writers. Freddie is our main narrator in that story. Whit and Marigold are both students at Harvard. Yeah. So later in the day, that's the Boston one, isn't it, Natasha?
Yeah, it's in Boston.
Yeah.
I mean, I think others are too. Isn't MIT also in Boston? We're across this.
I'm pretty sure they're at Harvard. Anyway, later in the day, a body is uncovered, and the 4 strangers, of course, are bonded by this extreme experience of being a witness to a murder. And while we are being drawn into this murder mystery, we also know that what we're reading is being written by an Australian author, Hannah, back here in Australia, who's corresponding with a mega fan named Leo, who's in Boston, and he's feeding her local information. And so we're reading both the murder mystery in the library and the correspondence from Leo, who's critiquing the murder mystery. And, his input and suggestions sort of become increasingly concerning. He starts sort of sending her ideas for murders and photos of crime scenes, and our Aussie author gets increasingly concerned about the lengths that our fiction fan might go to for a good story. Now, that's not really a spoiler because it's kind of there on the back cover, and in all the ways that Sulari Gentill is talking about this, she sort of shares the real life inspiration, which was that she was corresponding with a guy called Larry who was in America, and Larry came upon a crime scene. This is the real life story, and her husband kind of was looking over her shoulder in bed and going, "Geez, I hope Larry's not going around killing people so he can send you crime scenes."
Wow.
And that was kind of the spark of.
Wow, my head hurts. I'm not sure I'm following this. I said there are so many layers.
Oh,
okay.
No. It's easy to follow. It's simple. It's two stories. There's a murder mystery being written by the fictional Hannah, and then there's a correspondence to Hannah from Leo in Boston.
Yep.
But what works so well in this book is that as our American correspondent critiques her Australian use of language and gives her tips about the weather and what clothing they would wear and where they should eat in Boston, it just very neatly bridges that Australian-US divide. So Australian readers are rewarded with references to like Tim Tams and bushfires and the superiority of Australian coffee, but American readers will also enjoy Leo's corrections when our author uses little words and phrases that don't sound authentic coming out of the mouth of an American character. And so it's a really fun idea, and even though you would think it's drawing attention to the fact that what you're reading is just made up, it somehow doesn't detract. You're still very invested in these fictional characters, and it's definitely a real page turner. Like, it keeps you guessing right till the end. It's a lot of fun. It's not particularly violent, but it does really keep you on the edge of your seat. And I think anyone who's a book lover or a writer will love all the literary references, the reflections on the process of writing and all that sort of thing. So I'm highly recommending it, and I reckon it's going to make Sulari Gentill quite famous, actually.
It sounds great.
So, I mean, maybe, maybe this isn't a fair question and maybe we're going a bit deep, but like if all the murder mysteries are now like meta about being murder mysteries, like is that the decadence of the genre? Like, are we seeing kind of late murder mystery writing?
Do you think it's the death of the genre? Like, it's literally like everything will be done, and then
once everything becomes like self-conscious and about its own form, is that kind of like the tail end, like the glorious burning out of the genre? I don't know. Just raising it.
It's interesting because, I think these books are still so popular. This one's, as I said, it's got bestseller flags on a whole heap of online platforms. But I have to say, where do you go next? And I mean, this book is designed to be a standalone. I think it's highly likely that this book will be made into a movie, to be honest. And I think it's highly likely that it will get a sequel just because it's popular. So therefore you kind of get asked to write another one. But then I don't know how you would do it again. That's the thing. Yeah, I don't know how you would do it. So, yeah, it will be.
People always come up with something.
Yeah. There you go. So in a sec, we'll get Yolanda's review, but it has been a long time since I have found myself kind of staying up late reading under the covers, and this book, The Woman in the Library, did that. I suddenly was like, oh, gosh, it's 1 a.m. I really need to sleep. And so I want to ask you guys today, what has been that book for you? I'll start with you, Yolanda.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, probably the last book that kept me up late into the evening was the book Natasha just reviewed, Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. I think a good murder mystery has almost a unique capacity to do that, because you need to find out what happened. If it can make you care about the characters, you just really want to see them through to the end. And I think that that book really was doing that for me. So I had a bit of a sleepless night over that one.
Yeah. Did you pick the ending, Yolanda?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't know that it occurs to me to try often.
You're just sitting back enjoying the ride.
Yes, there was certainly an element of the ending that I don't think I could have picked. So I'd love to hear later which part you picked.
Yep.
But definitely enjoyed it. I probably read it too quickly to stop and try and figure it out, which I should try to do that as I get to the third act.
Hey, you do you.
Actually, something cute that Sulari Gentill did with her book is she actually gives you like a little envelope with some Cluedo cards, and then when you get to a certain point in the book, I think it's page 235, you're supposed to take out the Cluedo cards and write your answer. So, I think it was so-and-so in the library because, and you write your answer down and then you see if you're right. So that's kind of fun.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's great.
I didn't do it because I was too scared to open the cards in case they told me the answer.
Right.
So did you open them at the end and realise that they wouldn't have?
I opened them at the end and realised that what I was meant to do. So if I pass the book on, I will give clearer instructions to the person.
Oh, amazing.
Who gets it. Do you have one? A book that's kept you awake?
Yeah, sure. See, interestingly, I'm very tired at the moment, right? So it's got to be something special to keep me from turning the light off and going to sleep. But interestingly, the one that I think that did that for me recently was I was rereading Sense and Sensibility, which, so this is not a suspense thing. I know what happens. I've read Sense and Sensibility before multiple times. I've seen the movie more times. But I think just like the chapters are so short and Austen's prose is so delightful that I was like, I'll just read one more.
You were just enjoying being
It wasn't
there.
1 a.m.
Just enjoying being in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, what's one more Tim Tam?
That's right. Exactly. What's one more Austen chapter?
Yeah.
So, Alanda, we've been saving yours till last because it's a little bit different to the other books we've been discussing. Your choice is not a murder mystery as such, but a saga about murder and revenge. So The Sorrow Stone is a novel based on the true story of an Icelandic heroine, Disa, a young woman who fled from Norway to Iceland with her son in the Viking Age. Disa had committed murder to avenge the death of her brother, but then she fled across the open ocean to start a new life on the fjords of Iceland. First question, Alanda, what drew you to this book? What made you pick it up?
Yeah. Well, I was lucky enough to get a sample copy, which is always a good start because you get that little feeling of, no one else has read this yet, which I love to feel special. One of the perks of working in a bookshop. But I have actually spent some time in Norway, and the book starts out in Norway. I went on exchange there when I was at uni. So that was a point of connection. But I also just, since I was a teenager, have really loved historical fiction and stories that sort of take me out of my own world and put me into someone else's experience that's really different from my own. I've always really enjoyed that. So, yeah, that's what I was hoping for from this book.
That's really fascinating that you've actually been to Norway and therefore you've got probably some pictures in your head of the landscape and the feelings of the cold and that sort of thing, which would have really fed into enjoyment of this book. So can you tell us about Disa? What happens to make her leave Norway?
Yeah, so Disa, she's the older sister of two brothers, and they live with their family in Norway. And it comes to a point where Disa's father has decided it's time for her to start thinking about marriage, and she has her eye on an unsuitable match that her family don't approve of, a poor neighbour boy who is not quite up to scratch from her brother's and her dad's perspective. And her brother actually kills this neighbor who won't let the matter drop, breaking Disa's heart, obviously. And then the family are exiled from Norway for this murder that her brother did. So she is then stuck on a ship sailing from Norway to Iceland with her brother who killed the man she loved, and they have to start afresh in Iceland with these stories hanging over their head in their new community that her brother is a murderer. It sort of starts there, and you get to that stage fairly quickly where they're building a new house in a valley in Iceland and meeting the neighbours and things like that.
So we always hear, about the Vikings as being brutal. Is this quite a brutal society that's portrayed in the book? Yeah,
it is fairly brutal. There's not a lot of they're not Vikings as such, but there's certainly that element of when someone's honor is at stake or someone has been wronged, there's no police to go to, there's no kind of judges to put it before. It's all just families laying out vengeance and taking matters into their own hands. And that's, generally the men. For Disa, that's her younger brothers who are taking those matters into their own hands. And she and the other women in the story mostly just have to live with it, and in some cases continue living in very close proximity with these murderous men who they have very complicated feelings for and relationships with. So that element of it feels very, very brutal, whereas the characters in these stories are really interdependent. They can't just up and leave if they're in a bit of a toxic family situation, or if they're in danger. They sort of need to, for the women, they need to stick with a man who will protect them to some extent. And that can be quite brutal.
So, I mean, this book is set over 1,000 years ago. What parts of this would be relatable for modern readers, or is that just completely not the point?
It's probably not entirely the point. I think in some senses it struck home to me, like I feel like their family relationships were much closer. Disa really loves her brothers, despite some of the things they do, and that's a really intense relationship. And I have 4 brothers, but I've moved away from home when I was 18. So just that contrast of the closeness and intensity of some of those relationships was maybe a little bit of a contrast. But I would say it's probably less of you relate to the characters really strongly, and maybe more a little bit an opportunity to go, what would I do if I was in her shoes, kind of thing? What would I have done in that situation?
So the author, Kari Gislason, says he had to really slow down when he was in Iceland to get a sense of the place and the time that he was writing about. So did you feel that the book really took you to 10th century Iceland?
Yes. There's certainly I don't know, I don't want to make the book sound depressing, because I found it really engaging and interesting, but a sense of the bleakness of particularly of Iceland. It sounds beautiful, but also kind of enormous mountains, sort of mossy valleys. One of the characters comes from a sort of a volcanic area, and he's moved into this more fertile valley. Iceland does in some ways feel like another planet. Beautiful, but also in some parts of it quite a harsh landscape. And also there's just a big sense of the emptiness of it, because they are settlers in Iceland, and the country isn't very full. So there's sort of a group of families living within sort of a day's ride of each other, but very much the sense that outside of that there's no one around. Maybe something that you would experience in Australia going out west, but it's a bit of a unique feeling, I think.
So what did you enjoy about the book?
I really enjoyed being put in someone else's shoes. I have a passing interest in history, but I often need it to be put into an interesting narrative. I've said that I'd learn a lot more history. There are more musicals like Hamilton that make it really fun and throw in some hip hop music. So I think historical fiction does the same thing for me, because this, as you said, Katrina, is based on some sagas from Iceland's history, and Disa was a real person, although her name's been simplified for the story. So for readers of Kari's historical book, Saga Lands, I believe the sagas would be familiar, but this is a way that you get to sort of inhabit the history. And I feel like when it becomes narrative, you can remember it and get it kind of into you so much more deeply. So I love when a story can do that for me and give me a sense of a place and its history.
It's interesting too, because there aren't many European stories that we haven't heard over and over again, and this is certainly not a story that's familiar to me. So I think that's kind of a little bit intriguing that there's some European history that is less well known.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I think we get the sort of, the history of England and the UK and all the kings and queens and all of that pretty thoroughly. I mean, apparently these sagas are really well known in Norway and Iceland. And I think part of the interesting thing about this book, the author Kari said that Disa is not she's not remembered particularly fondly in the original sagas. She's not focused on a great deal, but she is not well loved for choosing her complicated relationship with her brothers. It was very much the thing that was expected of her was to choose loyalty to her blood family, her brothers, above all else, above love and her husband and things like that. So that's a bit of a complicated thing in the story, but he's, I think to some extent, Kari is redeeming her character and giving her another chance in some senses.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Thanks, Alanda.
No worries. Thanks, Katrina.
That's Alanda Joyce from the Little Lost Bookshop. We've been talking about The Sorrow Stone by Kari Gislason, and I'm now imagining it in like a Hamilton-style musical with hip-hop across the fjords.
Yeah. There'd definitely be some tragic songs. It would be beautiful.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, guys. That's all for this episode. If you want to share your thoughts about any of the books we've talked about, email us, bookclub@hopebookclub.com.au. And I hope you've enjoyed this 40th episode of the Hope Book Club. In this edition, we have reviewed Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson, The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentill, and The Sorrow Stone by Kari Gislason. Thanks for listening to the Hope Book Club, because life's just better with a book.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.